Tantor Audio presents Worry, Hope and Help for a Common Condition by Edward M. Hallowell, M.D. Narrated by Pete Larkin. Worry, to strangle, throttle, kill by violence, to seize by the throat and tear or lacerate, for example, dogs or wolves attacking sheep. Oxford English Dictionary. Preface. Excessive worry is an exhausting and dangerous problem for millions of Americans. People who worry a lot suffer, as do the people close to them. Some people worry so intensely that worry becomes much more than an annoyance. It hinders their work, their personal lives, or both. A recent survey of primary care physicians in the United States reported that at least one-third of office visits were prompted by some form of anxiety. Furthermore, over the course of a lifetime, at least 1 in 4 people, 25% of the population, or some 65 million individuals, will meet the criteria for one or more of the medical conditions called anxiety disorders, treatable disorders defined by the presence of debilitating worry. Like high blood pressure, excessive worry can make you physically sick. It can even kill you. As Dr. Charles Mayo of the Mayo Clinic said years ago, worry affects circulation, the glands, the whole nervous system, and profoundly affects the heart. I have never known a man who died from overwork, but many who died from doubt. Worry is a core component of numerous medical disorders and is central in many solvable, if not medically diagnosable, problems in life, such as excessive pessimism, timidity, procrastination, and underachievement. The key to dealing with it is to acquire the knowledge that will allow you to approach worry as a problem you can manage, as opposed to suffering worry as if it were a miserable, immutable given. The fact is that tens of millions of Americans suffer from some treatable kind of worry, without knowing either that there is a medical name for what they are suffering from, or that there are affordable, practical treatments that can help them get over what they've got. Worry is like blood pressure. You need a certain level to live, but too high a level can hurt you. Most people don't realize that worry, like blood pressure, can be regulated. In fact, we can use some of the same treatments we use for high blood pressure to reduce excessive worry. Treatments such as meditation, exercise, stress reduction, dietary modification, and certain medications. In addition, we now have various new treatments specifically designed for worry that are highly effective. Most of these do not involve medication, but even the medications we use now are safer and more effective than ever. Each generation needs to update itself to keep abreast of new methods for dealing with a problem as ubiquitous as worry. The best-selling book about worry in the last generation was Dale Carnegie's How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, Time-Tested Methods for Conquering Worry. The book originally had great appeal, but today's audiences might find its tone and suggestions somewhat naive, and of course its scientific content is a bit out of date. While in some ways Carnegie's advice is timeless, a tremendous amount of new information has become available since 1944, the year the book was published. Most people today are not aware of all that we have learned about worry in the last 50-odd years. Although we have new knowledge, it spreads slowly, even in this age of instant access. People need to know how much we now understand about the treatable conditions that involve worry, such as depression, panic disorder, obsessive-compulsive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and attention deficit disorder. And they also have to learn about what we know concerning the ordinary worry of everyday life. The good news is that we know much more today than we did in Carnegie's time, and we have practical methods of treatment that our parents' generation never heard of. When worry becomes toxic, it ceases to serve as the useful built-in alarm system nature meant it to be, and becomes instead a painful problem in itself. As a car alarm system that won't shut off, our human alarm system can drive its owner crazy and get him into trouble when it won't silence itself. Sufferers of excessive worry know they worry more than they need to, but they don't know how to stop. They suffer with worry as if it were inescapable. Although reassurance can help temporarily, people who worry too much require more than simple reassurance or some hearty exhortation to buck up. They already know they should buck up and worry less. What they yearn to know is how. They need practical methods of extinguishing excessive worry, remedies that actually work to reduce both the pain of worry and the tremendous damage worry can do at work and at home. At its worst, worry can be a relentless scavenger, roaming the corners of your mind, feeding on anything, never leaving you alone. On the other hand, not all worry is bad. Effective planning depends on anticipating danger. This is worry at its best. Obliterating worry entirely, as, say, by using a drug, can be even more dangerous than worrying too much. The trick is to learn to worry well, at the right time, to the right degree. Toxic worry is a disease of the imagination. It is insidious and invisible. Like a virus, it sets upon you unwanted and unbidden, subtly stealing its way into your consciousness until it dominates your life. As worry infiltrates your mind, it diminishes your ability to enjoy your family, your friends, your physical being, and your achievements, because you live in fear of what might go wrong. It undermines your ability to work, to love, and to play. It interferes with your starting a new task, or even enjoying the completion of an old one. There are many ways to field your worries with skill, and this book will describe a wide array of them. Some of the most dramatic involve medications. The advent of inhibitors of the reuptake of serotonin, such as Prozac and Zoloft, coupled with the development of new anti-anxiety medications, such as Buspar, Klonopin, and various beta blockers, have given millions of people better lives. However, medication is not usually necessary in dealing with worry. This book will explore many of the highly effective non-medication approaches now available. Some of these are ancient and time-tested, such as exercise, rest, reassurance, and humor. Some are old, yet not in widespread use in this country, such as meditation and yoga. Some are in fact quite new and proving to be highly effective, such as cognitive behavioral therapy and eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. These and many more will be explained throughout the book. These remedies build upon what we underestimated as recently as 15 years ago, the biological genetic underpinnings of various kinds of excessive worry. From the habitual worrier who torments himself by incessantly searching for what can go wrong in life, to the survivor of a traumatic past who is unable to let go of the pain, to the self-castigating perfectionist who lives in major fear of even minor failures, excessive worriers abound in all stations of life. We are only now, in the 1990s, which has been called the decade of the brain, beginning to pinpoint what is happening in the nerve cells of the worrier, instead of just in his soul, what neurotransmitters might be to blame, and what remedies might quiet the storm inside. Indeed, the discovery of a gene implicated in producing chronic worriers made front-page news in the New York Times in November 1996. The paper reported on a study published in the prestigious journal Science, linking a certain gene to individuals who are prone to anxiety, pessimism, and negative thinking. The gene involved was isolated and found to be a short version of what in other people is a longer gene, specifically the SLC6A4 gene, on chromosome 17q12. What does this mean? Put simply, you might be born a worrier. Of course, such studies mark just a beginning, small pieces of the very large puzzle of worry. But all the pieces help answer the age-old question of how to worry wisely. The new research explores not only the biology of the brain and the physical nature of worry, it also looks into the psychology of worry. For too many centuries, we have been sidetracked by debates about nature versus nurture, genetics versus life experience. The approach that makes sense is to embrace what we know about both body and mind, nature and nurture. I originally became interested in the subject of worry from my work with people suffering from attention deficit disorder, ADD. a neurological condition that involves a wandering of attention, which is often accompanied by excessive worrying. However, more and more I began to hear from patients who did not have ADD that they too were plagued by one form or another of excessive worry, to such a degree that it hurt and compromised their daily activities. On the other end of the spectrum, I treated some high-risk takers who didn't worry enough. Some worry is necessary. After all, the refusal to worry constitutes a serious problem in its own right, commonly called denial. It is essential to distinguish among the different kinds of worry, and this book points out ways of recognizing each of them. Broadly speaking, there is, on the one hand, adaptive worry, wise worry that alerts you to real danger, and on the other hand, there is maladaptive worry, unwise worry, that serves no useful purpose and can hamper your life. Further, among the toxic forms of worry, we can identify different types. First, there is the toxic worry that accompanies certain underlying treatable conditions that are often genetically transmitted, such as depression or generalized anxiety disorder or hyperthyroidism. Then there is the worry that life may inflict through some tragedy or trauma. Finally, there is the toxic worry of the habitual worrier, who seems to have learned from the air he breathes to worry always and everywhere, no matter what. He doesn't meet the diagnostic criteria of any actual medical or psychiatric disorder, but he suffers nonetheless. We need to help not only those who suffer from severe worry, but also those people who are doing fine in life, but still know that they worry too much for their own good. No one should be beset by legions of worries, night and day, trooping in and out of the dark recesses of their imaginations like carpenter ants, eager to eat away the foundations of their lives. This book is filled with stories. All of the examples and anecdotes are drawn from real life. Some of them are presented without any changes in identifying details, and these are noted as such in the book. However, I have changed the names and identifying details of most of the individuals described. My heartfelt thanks go to all those people who generously gave of themselves, so that the examples in this book would be both vivid and helpful. Edward M. Hallowell. Introduction, 2002. On September 11th, 2001, we Americans learned to worry in new ways. Our worrying led us to do some unusual things. Some of us bought parachutes to keep under our desks in high-rise office buildings. Others bought gas masks. Some of us bought large quantities of bottled water, which we stored in our basements in the hope of feeling safer. Others stocked up on Cipro and other antibiotics we knew little about. Some of us set to learning all we could about Islam. Others, all we could about anthrax. Others, all we could about smallpox. Some of us agonized over whether to travel. Others, whether to go to school or work. Others, whether to leave the city and move to Vermont. All of us felt a new danger. None of us felt as safe as we had before. As we tried to figure out what to do in this new world, one of the most pressing tasks was mental. How were we supposed to cope with the worry we all were feeling? How much of this worry was justified? How much was an overreaction? No one knew. We all learned in the days and weeks after September 11th that this new war was psychological even more than physical. It was being fought in the mind even more than in the air, at sea, or on the ground. The terrorists set out to make us all feel afraid, indeed terrorized. We were told not to let them do that to us, that to let them make us feel so terrified that we didn't go about our business as usual would be to let them win. But how were we to prevent that from happening? What kind of gas mask could we buy that would prevent us from inhaling toxic terror? This book, written at a time when no one could have imagined September 11th, 2001, provides such a psychological gas mask. It offers a logical, practical method that anyone can use for dealing with excessive worry, or what I call toxic worry. Toxic worry is different from useful worry, or what I call wise worry. Wise worry leads to constructive action. To do well in this world, you need to worry wisely. As Andrew Grove said about the business world, only the paranoid survive. The ability to worry well enough to detect danger and then take steps to prevent bad outcomes is a major survival tool, one that we need now more than ever. When the government tells us to be vigilant and on the lookout for anything strange as we go about our normal day, it is basically urging us to worry wisely, neither worry too much nor too little. This is a new skill for many of us. However, it is one we all can learn. It is important to worry enough, but not too much, because not only can too much worry, toxic worry, make you unhappy, it can make you inept and even physically ill. Instead of acting as a guide that leads to constructive action, which is what wise worry does, toxic worry freezes you up. It paralyzes you as it eats away at your sense of well-being and your good judgment. Toxic worry can make an otherwise sane person seem crazy, devoid of sound judgment, peace of mind, and happiness. Thankfully, we know a lot now about toxic worry and how to control it. Brain science and psychological research blossomed in the 1990s. We know where toxic worry comes from. It comes from our elaborate internal fear system run amok, like a car alarm that goes off when it shouldn't. Even better than knowing where it comes from, we know many different ways to subdue toxic worry. The goal is not to turn worry off altogether. That would be like throwing away your car alarm rather than getting it fixed. Not worrying at all is a dangerous state in its own right. We call it denial. The goal instead is to fix the car alarm, to bring worry down out of the toxic range into the normal range, where it can serve us as it should. I wrote this book to help people who worry excessively, including myself, as I am prone to toxic worry all too often. I sorted through the recent research and then, based upon that, as well as my own clinical and personal experience, I wrote down as plain and practical as possible what works best to combat toxic worry. This book will give you a method you can use in your own life, or with your children, or in your business, or anywhere you need it to deal with toxic worry of any kind, whether it is related to September 11th, financial problems, health issues, or anything at all. Many people have tested the methods in this book since the original publication in 1997. I am glad to report that many have found it remarkably effective in their daily lives. Since the book first came out, I have made a video for PBS based upon it. The Harvard Business School Press has used it to create a stress management program for corporate customers, and I have given hundreds of presentations based upon it to groups of all kinds, from professional groups to parents, schools, businesses, and numerous other organizations. Many primary care physicians have told me they recommend the book to their patients, as about 1/3 of primary care office visits relate to worries that have no basis in an actual medical diagnosis. Managers in business have told me how effective it is in the workplace. Furthermore, so many parents and teachers have told me how well it works with young children and adolescents that I have developed a program based upon it, which teachers can use to help their students at all grade levels learn the skill of developing a resilient, optimistic attitude, while also learning how to reduce stress and control toxic worry. Children are under more stress than ever. This was so before September 11th, and has been only more so since then. It is important that they learn a practical method of dealing with it. The feedback that has come in since the book was first published has confirmed what I knew when I wrote the book in the first place. Toxic worry can be reduced in most people's lives most of the time by following a simple, basic plan that anyone can learn to use. When I wrote this book, I knew how crucial it was for children and adults to learn how to control toxic worry and develop a realistically positive mental attitude. Never, however, did I imagine that there would be such an emergent, widespread need for the control of toxic worry, as we have seen since that dark day in September 2001. Never did I imagine that nearly every adult in this country would come to suffer bouts of toxic worry, that many children would add the word terrorist to their daily vocabulary, and that we would suffer a national epidemic of anxiety. But then that day happened. I am sure you remember where you were when you first heard the news. I was in my office, seeing patients, when a colleague told me he'd just heard on the radio that an airplane had flown into one of the World Trade Center towers. He didn't know if it was a hoax or true. Soon enough, we all found out how horribly true it was. Since that day, we've all had to deal with more worry than most of us were used to. Not only do we need to deal with worries related to terrorism, we've had to worry about how to help our children deal with this new world. And at the same time, we've been hit with financial woes that we haven't seen in quite a while. Not to mention looming public health questions about smallpox, anthrax, and nuclear plants. When Franklin Roosevelt said during a national crisis decades ago, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself," he was trying to reassure us that we would find a way to make it through the Great Depression. We could recover, even if we were broke. Of course, he knew there was a whole lot more to fear than fear itself, but he also knew that if Americans could control their toxic worrying, they would be much better able to summon up the positive energy they would need to rebuild and grow. The trick was, and is, how do you do it? How did FDR help us outfox fear? By helping us apply essentially the same methods that I lay out here. Psychologically, we face a situation today that is similar to what we faced all those years ago in the Depression. We have been shocked out of a period of security and prosperity into a period of insecurity and economic decline. We solved the problem then, and we will solve it now. But if we are to take the steps that we need to take, not only to protect ourselves from terrorist attacks, but also to rekindle our economy, we need to tap into our native stores of optimism, of problem-solving, rather than problem-fearing. We need to feel safe enough to act decisively. FDR knew what psychological research has proven. Fear can freeze us and make action impossible. The deer in the headlights gets run over. In order to set fear far enough aside for us to be able to act creatively and boldly, we need to find a method other than denial for doing so. Denial leaves us too vulnerable because it leaves us without the protection that we need and unaware that we need protection. In addition, the media won't allow us to linger in denial for very long. But even if we were not in the midst of a national crisis, controlling toxic worry would be a crucial skill for us all to learn. Toxic worry holds people back in life in so many ways, suffering and underachieving at work, not daring to ask out the person they sense they might fall in love with, losing sleep at night, spending endless time in unnecessarily toxic states of mind, failing to speak up at the crucial moment in a meeting, or not daring to ask a question in class. Indeed, I deem fear the most dangerous learning disability, and by far the most common. It is as important to learn to control excessive worry as it is to control high blood pressure, and excessive worry is more common. So what do we do? What is a reliable method for controlling toxic worry? The method I outline in detail in this book is something we all can use. A basic method for controlling worry. First, it helps to understand what I call the basic equation of worry. This is a good way to conceptualize where toxic worry comes from. Heightened vulnerability plus lack of control equals toxic worry. The more vulnerable you feel, regardless of how vulnerable you actually are, and the less control you feel you have, regardless of how much control you actually have, the more toxic your worrying will become. Therefore, any steps you can take to reduce your feelings of vulnerability and or increase your feelings of control will serve to reduce your feelings of toxic worry. Terrorists prey upon us by creating feelings of vulnerability in us, even when statistics tell us we are safer than we feel. Once one person died of inhalation anthrax, we all felt afraid of anthrax, even though statistics told us dying in a car accident was far, far more likely than contracting this disease. We can combat the worry the terrorists instilled, or any other kind of toxic worry, by reducing our feelings of vulnerability and increasing our feelings of control, or to use FDR's term, by trying to control our fear of fear. The Great Depression spun out of control when people panicked and precipitated a run on the banks. Effective handling of this current crisis depends upon our not panicking. But how? How do we stay out of the paralyzing grip of toxic worry? If you're walking through a minefield, how do you not feel so afraid that you can't take another step? You need a plan. A great deal of recent research has shown that it is the fear of fear that is the dangerous intensifier. FDR was right. The fear of fear is what turns ordinary fear into a panic attack, for example. The fear of fear is what paralyzes us. The fear of fear is what escalates a genuine but probably manageable danger into what feels like an impossibly overpowering and unmanageable disaster. Suddenly, fear escalates from a sharp breeze into a tornado that rips you apart. When you have a plan, you can turn to the plan for guidance, which immediately makes you feel as if you are less vulnerable and more in control, whether you are or not. So we need a plan, a rational method to keep danger in perspective, a method that will help us feel less vulnerable and help us feel more in control. Whether the danger we perceive stems from terrorists, the poor economy, a concern about our children, or a mole on our forearm we think might be melanoma. We need a method for keeping our fear from running wild so that we can systematically dismantle the problem and take control. Let me outline an effective 5-step method, after which I will comment on the entire process. 1. Never worry alone. Talk to someone you trust, a friend, your spouse, a colleague, a relative. Call them on the phone or go in person. When you are alone, toxic worry intensifies. By far the most potent anti-worry device we have is contact with each other. 2. Get the facts. The toxic part of worry is usually based upon lack of information or wrong information. In the absence of facts, your imagination rushes in and amplifies the danger into a catastrophe, always envisioning the worst. Facts short-circuit this process. In the short run, the facts can intensify your worrying, but in the long run, you will be much better off with the facts than without them. If you are afraid to get the facts, you should go back to step 1 and not worry alone. Talk to someone. Doing this will probably make you feel strong enough to get the facts. 3. Make a plan. Based upon step 2, make a plan. Once you have marshaled support, step 1, and obtained the facts, step 2, you are ready to make a plan. Toxic worry loves a passive victim, but it shrinks in the face of someone with a plan. If you have a plan, even if your plan doesn't work, you feel less vulnerable and more in control, which instantly reduces your feeling of toxic worry. As toxic worry declines, your judgment improves, and your capacity to take constructive action returns. 4. Take care of yourself. When people worry at a toxic level, they tend to forget the basics of self-care, which only makes their worrying worse. Here are 5 basic steps of self-care you should practice all the time, but especially during times of danger and worry. Get enough sleep. Eat a balanced diet, and do not abuse alcohol or other substances as a means of controlling your worrying. Get plenty of vigorous exercise. Exercise is an anti-anxiety agent and an antidepressant. Pray or meditate. Both prayer and meditation calm the troubled mind and soul. Get regular doses of positive human contact, and avoid doses of negative human contact. In other words, try as much as you can to be around people who are good to you, and not be around people who are not. 5. Let it go. You can go to this step, step 5, only after you have addressed steps 1 through 4. But once you have addressed those, then you are ready to let the toxic worry go. If you are like most of us, the chances are that you will not be able to do this entirely, but that is the direction in which you should try to head. Many people do precisely the opposite. They try to hold on to their toxic worry as if it were unsafe to let it go. In fact, as you let go of your worry, You free up mental energy that will help you solve whatever problems you are dealing with. This is the basic 5-step method. It works with people of all ages, and it is effective against most kinds of toxic worry.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?